Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shapra. Today you find Ross, Widget, Gizmo and me in the fabulously beautiful village of Bibury. We've come here early in the morning for obvious reasons. This place gets extremely busy during the day, but it is stunning. We're going to show you around. Come with me. Bibury has been subjected to the sort of hyperbole that if you aren't careful can lead you astray. I completely understand that over the last few years I've been guilty of over-enthusing about my much-loved Cotswolds, but the way people have spoken about Bibury is in a league of its own. There was, even until very recently, an image of Arlington Row, Bibury's beautiful little line of weavers' cottages, on the inside cover of the British passport, presumably so that English people could take with them when they ventured into dangerous foreign territory the comforting memory of what we've come to think of as the quintessential English village. Now, don't get me wrong, Bibury is beautiful, particularly at 5:30 on a summer's morning. But the most beautiful village in England, as William Morris had it in 1871, I'm really not sure. It's true that Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift, that unlikely pair of 18th century satirists, travelling together to visit Lord Bathurst in August 1726, passed through Bibury, and also that Pope wrote that he would always associate the pleasing aspect of Bibury with his recent visit. But even 100 years later, in the late 19th century, Bibury was so remote that hardly anyone knew where it was. It was an isolated little place, just one of the string of little villages that bejewel the upper reaches of the incomparable Coln River with which Morris was so struck. Amusingly, searching for reference to the village, we discovered an Oxford guidebook written at the time which relates a story of an Oxford scholar more full of fun than money who proposed to a Bibury landlord, could it have been the Swan? Probably not, to teach him for a silver crown how to draw mild ale and strong beer from the same cask. The offer was accepted, and proceeding to the cellar, the scholar bored a hole in the full cask of ale and asked the landlord to stop it with his finger. Then, boring a hole where the strong beer was to run, the landlord was to stop that with his other hand. The wag then left, on the pretence of fetching some pegs, and mounting his horse, off he went, leaving the landlord a prisoner in his own cellar. The joke was certainly at the landlord's expense, but so many called to have a laugh that it turned at length in his favour by the increased demand. The moral of this probably apocryphal tale was, of course, that people who lived in places as incredibly remote as Bibury are naive, gullible and ignorant. And so the myth began. It seems kind of surly when you're surrounded by such beauty to introduce a sour note. But 100 years ago, this river was one of the best trout fishing streams in the whole of the area. It was teeming with trout. I can't see a single fish now. There's a sort of slimy weed on the bottom of the river, which is a very bad sign. And I'm afraid that even the wonderful River Coln, which produces millions of gallons of water every single day, teeming down this valley, can't keep itself clean from the pollutants that mankind puts in it. It's a shame, but it doesn't spoil the beauty of this extraordinary village. What is seen today as Bibury is actually two villages combined. Bibury itself is a small settlement surrounding the Church of St Mary, with a line of cottages along the east bank of the river as far as the Swan pub. Over the bridge is the village of Arlington, with its stratospherically famous line of cottages now protected by the National Trust. And, in front, the water meadow known as Rack Isle. The central cottages in this row were probably built by Osney Abbey as a wool store as long ago as 1380. It seems likely that the conversion to cottages started in the 16th century, when the end cottages were built. So beautiful is this row that Henry Ford, when searching the Cotswolds for buildings to dismantle and ship to America, was extremely keen to take Arlington Row, and took some serious dissuading. These settlements are downstream from the villages of Coln, St Dennis, Colne Rogers, Winson and Ablington, all of which we visited before, and a glance at our films will show you what the Bibury of Morris's day will have felt like, and perhaps help to explain his extremely enthusiastic report on the place. The river, as it enters Bibury, is fed by a hugely prolific spring which gushes from the hill beside the Swan Hotel. This lovely pub was probably built in 1800, only 30 years after the bridge itself was thrown across the river. Before that, all movement along the road westwards had to ford the river, and the water from the spring, so fresh and cold, caused problems for animals, both domestic and agricultural. The vast majority of the few people who came here will have come down the road from the north, through the aforementioned Colne villages, and it isn't hard to imagine how wonderful the aspect would have been as they emerged from the wooded lane from Ablington into the comparatively open vista of the village. Now, the main road east-west, over the bridge towards Cirencester, is busy, and of course compounded by the constant presence of visitors' cars along the stream. The spring created such a perfect environment for trout to breed in the River Coln that a trout farm was set up here in 1902. It's still here, and is now an amazing business, breeding unimaginable numbers of fish every year and selling in their terrific shop trout products of all kinds. They and their neighbours, the Swan Hotel, benefit most from the wondrous popularity of this little place. Another interesting reason for that popularity is that Emperor Hirohito of Japan, before he became emperor, spent time in England and stayed in Bibury, writing about it with the warmth and enthusiasm of Morris before him. It has become something of a pilgrimage for the Japanese people. Behind me is Bibury's very own lockup. If you were out on the town in the 18th century and you'd had a little bit too much to drink and you started to behave badly, this is where they'd throw you. It's amazing how many villages in this part of the world have one of these. Clearly it was a rowdy time. I wouldn't like to be locked up in there for very long. It has no window. The village of Bibury, at the southern end of the settlement, is centred round a lovely square of 17th and 18th century cottages, with a couple of substantial houses outlying it, one of which was the old vicarage. The church lies just south of the square and is delightful to visit. It's on the site of an important Saxon minster church, little of which remains, but there is an old Saxon gravestone set in the outside wall of the chancel, decorated with swirls, dots and faces, which is what is left of several, the others having been given to the British Museum in 1913. Reproductions of those donated can be found in the tomb recess in the south aisle. As is the way with so many churches in the region, it was altered and rebuilt in the late 12th and early 13th centuries, adding the tower and the aisles. Then again, the inevitable work, by no means always bad, I ought to say, by Waller and Son, late in the 19th century. The truth is that this church is a very complicated architectural puzzle and needs someone far more learned than I to go into it in detail. Suffice to say, it is a delight. A 13th century font, much restored, a lovely stone pulpit, probably 19th century, and a Scott-designed brass lectern, all add to the experience, along with some rather wonderful Italian needlework pictures from the mid-1700s. If you stand in the church porch and look outwards over the river to the fields opposite, you can appreciate the extraordinary setting this church enjoys. The beauty of the tree-topped slopes opposite is a spiritual experience all of its own. Just south of the church, almost adjoining, is the splendid house of Bibury Court. This building is a very good example of the great advantage the fashionable enthusiasm for the Cotswolds brings. Just a few years ago, Bibury Court was an hotel, and fast deteriorating to a very worrying extent. Today, it is a spectacular private home, restored to its former glory in the best possible way. Originally a smaller house built and owned by William Westwood, it was sold in 1625 to Sir Thomas Sackville, who extended the house to create its current E-shaped form. His arms can still be seen above the porch. Subsequent owners altered the internal layout according to fashion, in the 18th century for the Cotswold family, the 19th century for the second Lord Sherborne, and the early 20th century for Sir Orme Clark. In 1968, it was converted to an hotel with all the horror that entails. However, in 2015, it was rescued by the internationally renowned designer Mark Newson and his wife, fashion stylist Charlotte Stockdale. It is extremely difficult to imagine a more perfect pair to take on an important house like this. And whilst, sadly, none of us is likely to get a look at the final result for the moment, we can at least look down on this wonderful building from the hill above and be grateful that our descendants will get to see it as it is supposed to look for several generations hence. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip around this amazing place. It is wonderful at this time of the day, but of course it does get a little bit crowded later on. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can find us on all the normal platforms, and we'll see you very soon somewhere else in the Cotswolds.